Yeah. The bruises went away.
But he was.
See?
Can you see it?
How are you?
Amy Spain.
What you doing, man?
All right, it's about time for us to get started this evening, 7 o'clock. Before we get started tonight, I just want to take maybe just a quick minute or two. Who all has been to our website, just by show of hands? Who's actually logged on and seen it? Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anybody else? So 5 in here have seen the website. Okay. Well, here it is, for those of you who haven't seen it. You know, the website's a great tool for us for many reasons. One of the reasons is we're able to broadcast everything that we do here in terms of worship and also our Bible classes, to where if our members miss, you can get caught up or watch that. If you happen to be traveling, as some of you have been able to do, you log on and can actually watch our live services if you're unable to worship wherever you might be. Also, this is a good way for the community. You know, stats show that most people, before they ever visit any church, they're going to go to the website. It's almost just standard fare that, you know, the website's just, you know, if you don't have one, you're missing the boat. Most people, before they go check out a church, is they're going to visit their website and kind of see what they're all about, see what they believe, and maybe even see some sermons. And so that gives us a way to evangelize and get a foot in the door with many people. And so we put a lot of information up here. I just want to show a couple quick features just so you're aware, and then we'll move on. For the majority of what I want to show you is under this media tab. If you go in the top tab, as you can see here, this will give you access to all of our sermons, all of our Bible classes. The first place I want to show you just real quick is our audio sermons hub. And under here, you're going to see all of the sermons that have been preached here that have been recorded on the audio. There's a few that the audio didn't work for, and so there's going to be a couple that didn't make it. But by and large, all of the sermons are going to show up here the Monday following the Sunday that they were preached, and they'll be archived on here. And so you can see here it's the newest on top, and so I know it's kind of hard to see with the white against the gray, but these are the 2 sermons preached on Sunday. And the neat thing about this too is you can also sort it by preacher, by series. If you want to look at the Genesis series again, or look at our 1 Corinthians class, you can click that. Like say, for instance, Gary Hampton did our gospel meeting. If you want to see all of Gary's sermons on our website, you just click his name and click this filter button. And what it's going to do is it's going to filter all the results for just the ones that Gary preached. And so now you're going to see all of our gospel meeting sermons right here in one place. And if you want to listen to them, click on that play button. That's it. It's that simple. And so this is a great way to get caught up. If there's one you want to hear again, or you want it to share with somebody else, that's a good way to do that. Also, what I wanted to show you, that we're also keeping kind of a record of our classes here. And the first one being this one. This is the first class I've been doing this for, but I had a request by a woman on the internet who wanted to follow along with our class, and so she said, can you make available the slides and all these different things so I can follow along in class? And so I thought that was a good idea. And that way, not only people who might be all over the world wanting to take part in our class, but also if anybody misses a class, this is a great way to get caught up on the material you may have missed. Everything that's handed out in this class will be available on the website. So you'll see here that if you want to purchase the book, you can click that link, that'll take you there. The memory verses, you can download those. All the quizzes are up, including the one that you just picked up this evening. And here's all the classes, including the class videos. All of our classes are being recorded live on the internet, and they're being uploaded to YouTube for viewing. And so if you missed class number 1 and you wanted to get caught up, you could click on this and download the slides, and then you could click on the video, and it's going to take you to actually the class video, and you just play that, and you can follow along if you missed a class. And so I just wanted to make you aware of this resource. It's a great way for us to be able to maximize our efforts in teaching. And so keep this website in mind, not only for your own viewing, but also for those who you might be trying to reach with the gospel. Just recognize what we have on here. And there's much more we could look at, but I just wanted to show that to you very quickly. Up here are the quiz scores from last time. You guys did great. The class average for quiz number 1 was 95%. And for quiz number 2, it was 99%. And so you guys did a great job. Most everybody got 100% on this last one, with the exception of 2 93s, but they just missed 1, and so that's great as well. If you see these yellow bars, that means that if you see your number here on the left and there's a yellow bar by your quiz, that means I don't have a quiz for you. So whoever number 17 is, I don't have a quiz number 1 for you. If you're number 27, I don't have a quiz number 1, and so forth. And then the yellow on the second column is quiz number 2. And I know one person just gave me their other quiz, and so at least one of those will go away. But if you see your number on here and a yellow bar by your quiz, that means I don't have a quiz for you, and you either need to redo it and turn it in. You won't lose any credit. I put quiz number 1 and quiz number 2 out there for you to fill out if you missed one, and so you can do that and turn that in next time. If there's a mistake and you turned one in and you know you did, and yet you didn't get credit for it, just please see me. That's kind of one of the difficulties with this number system is, if there's a problem with who turned in what, it's, anyway, if you want credit for one of these and you turned it in, just let me know. I very well may have made an error on that. So great job on the quiz. Also, I want to draw your attention to the memory verses. This first column is quiz number 1. Second column is the memory work, which of course is extra credit. And so this looks very good. The amount of memory verses that have been memorized are 25. Out of the whole class, there have been 25 verses that have been memorized. And so that's very, very good. And we want to encourage that and continue to try hard with those memory verses. I know that some of you wrote on your quiz, I'm having a hard time, but I'm trying. That's the point. As long as we're trying to get God's word into our hearts, and that's the important thing. So keep up the good work. Y'all are doing a great job with the quizzes. Quiz number 3 is on the table, and just make sure we turn that in next Wednesday night. That'll be over chapter 5 and chapter 6. Before we begin class this evening, I'd like to sing a song, as our custom is for Wednesday night class. It's actually not going to be 825. That's leftovers from last week. We're going to sing 760. Who will follow Jesus? We'll just sing one verse. We'll have a prayer, and then we will begin our class for this week. 760. Who will follow Jesus? Who will follow Jesus, standing for the right, holding up his banner in the thickest fight, listening for his orders, ready to obey? Who will follow Jesus, serving him today? Who will follow Jesus? Who will make reply? I am on the Lord's side, Master, here am I. Who will follow Jesus? Who will make reply? I am on the Lord's side, Master, here am I. Let's pray. Our Father who is in heaven, Father, we fall before your throne, unworthy to come before you, but we're so grateful that through your Son we have access to you in prayer. Father, we are so thankful for every blessing that you give us. We're especially grateful for the Christ who gives us a living hope in which we can have joy and confidence. We're grateful for your dear word that directs our steps, that gives us the words of eternal life, that guarantees us the best life here and the life to come as well. We're grateful that we have access to your word, Father, that you've given us this opportunity and preserved your word through the years, that that we can come together as your people, even now, to study. We pray that you would bless our efforts here in this class. Father, we pray that you would be with all of us as we endeavor to study together your book, to learn the things you would have for us to know, and that we would apply these things to our lives, to change the way that we think, to change the way that we act, that we would be more and more like your Son Jesus. Father, please bless us with wisdom and understanding as we go through this class this evening. Help us all to have our minds focused upon learning your word. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about chapter 6 of the Faith Built Upon the Sand book. Unfortunately, I don't have any extra copies of the book. I know some maybe forgot to bring theirs, or perhaps you have been in this class with us and you don't have one. I apologize. Maybe if you're sitting next to somebody who has one, you guys can kind of look on. We probably won't be doing a lot of quoting and reading from the book itself, but probably the best thing for this class is if you have the PowerPoint handouts that are out on the foyer table. And so you can follow along with us on those. This chapter is entitled A Newly Defined Tolerance. And as usual, I'm assuming that everybody has read the chapter. We're not going to have time to rehash everything that Brother Sanders has laid out. So I trust that you've read those things. We're just going to draw attention to a couple particular points and then open it up for discussion so we can make the best use of our time together. This week, in this chapter, he basically breaks it down into two main parts. These are the bold headings you'll find in this chapter. Number 1, freedom of speech. And number 2, religious pluralism is self-contradictory. Now, I want to focus in on this idea of tolerance that Brother Sanders talks about. Of course, it's in the title of the chapter, The Newly Defined Tolerance. Now, tolerance is a word that probably means different things to different people depending on who's using it and in which context the word is being used. Tolerance in today's world probably means something very different than the tolerance that we would read about in the Bible, or the tolerance that Christians are expected to have. Tolerance in the 21st century culture. These first two quotes are in the book right at the very beginning, and I'm just going to read these. Thomas A. Helmbach said, "The definition of new tolerance is that every individual's beliefs, values, lifestyle, and perception of truth claims are equal. There is no hierarchy of truth. Your beliefs and my beliefs are equal, and all truth is relative." That's the modern understanding of this word tolerance as it's used in our world. And this goes back to something we've been talking about this whole class, this idea of postmodernism, that truth is not absolute, that everybody has their own truth and they're all equal, and really there's no appeal to an absolute standard. The second definition is by Ryan Dobson. It says, "Tolerance is the virtue of those who believe in nothing. Rather than stand up for what is right or wrong, the voice of tolerance says we should just let everyone be, that we'll better understand each other if we accept them as they are." So kind of the same idea, but adds a new dimension to it. The idea is that we're so tolerant that we just accept any old thing. We really don't stand up for anything. We have no conviction about one body of truth. It's really just, well, that's what I feel, but that doesn't really apply to you. We've talked about that a lot in this class. Another definition I found about this was outside of the book, but I thought it was very good nonetheless. Dwayne Bryant writes for Apologetics Press. And he said, "Tolerance, as it's often promoted, is a true enemy of humanity. It teaches that every lifestyle is not only permissible, but should even be celebrated as long as it does not take too strong a stand on anything, and certainly not on the Bible." And I think that would be a very, very good description of tolerance in our culture as well. Nobody has a problem with you until you start to take a strong stand on something, especially if that strong stand is backed by the Bible. As long as your beliefs kind of don't infringe on everybody else and you're not saying anything too strong, you're okay. But the minute you cross that threshold, you're now labeled as maybe a bigot, somebody who's ignorant, somebody who's intolerant. So that's how the term tolerant is being used in our culture. So how is tolerance misused in our society today? Why is this wrong? Why is this a problem? is this wrong?
Is that wrong, Greg?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay, why? What's wrong about this approach?
I mean, truth is truth.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can have look at something and be true. The truth is the truth.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
what
I can say, what if he believes okay, what if I believe okay, and it's all right, it's true. No, it's not either.
But what, Mr. Bill, if what you're saying is true, it makes me uncomfortable. That's not okay, right?
Should I back away from that?
No, you shouldn't.
I should not back away from it.
But that's the argument, right?
That's the argument.
Well, you can say it's true, but wait a minute. You're now infringing on what I
It's true.
Exactly.
The problem is it takes you away from God's established truth.
Exactly. Exactly. It kind of puts everything that, there's all these truth claims out there. People say that this is true, this is true. How do we know which one's right? Because obviously they contradict each other. They can't both be true at the same time. Something can't both be red and blue at the same time. It can't both be soft and hard at the same time. It's either one or the other. And so, like Mr. Gerald said, the further we move from God's revealed truth, which is absolute. What's the difference between absolute and subjective? It's key. If something's
Absolute is absolute, it's the truth.
it's absolute, it's the truth, but what's that mean?
It won't change.
It doesn't change. It's immutable. Okay? God cannot lie. It's an immutable truth. He can't lie. He never has been able to, and he never will, because he can't. It's not part of his nature. So when we say something is absolutely true, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Is that just somebody's subjective experience about what he or she thinks about Jesus, or is he in fact the Son of God?
The latter.
Exactly. But in our culture, you see how Jesus gets passed around. You see how he gets treated. He was just, the writers of the New Testament just kind of painted him in this picture because of the way their culture was in the day, and he really wasn't all of those things. He didn't really perform all those miracles. That's where it leads us. Tolerance.
That's what we get, that's your interpretation.
Exactly.
That's what you think.
That's just your 2 cents,
That's what
right?
the Bible says.
Why do you think that someone might use tolerance, this idea of tolerance? And, you know what? We all see this. If you haven't seen it in your personal life, then I'm surprised. You say something, well, this is wrong. The Bible says this is wrong, whatever it might be. Doesn't matter the topic. But somebody else, that's maybe something they're engaged in, or something that they know a lot of their friends are engaged in. And so they say, well, wait a minute, you gotta be tolerant. You gotta be tolerant. You're intolerant. You might say something like, Islam is wrong. Wait a minute, you gotta be tolerant of those people. Why would somebody say something like that?
I think a lot of people just refuse to accept the truth. And like I say, it should be tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
And we speak on like a lot of issues that go on in the world, but people that look at everything from a worldly point of view, they're gonna accept whatever comes along.
Exactly. I think what you said about they don't want to accept the truth. I think that's a key element. They don't want to believe it's true, Mr. Bill.
Look at all the laws that are passed in our land, it's been tolerant.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it's becoming more acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things. Look at abortion, and you go on and on and on about things that people is tolerant now within the society which we live. It's just, and it's filtering into the church.
Mm-hmm. Think about this. Think about how silly it is for somebody to say, well, your belief system holds this. When they say that you're not being tolerant, what they're really saying is, I reject what you're saying. I reject what you're saying as being true. I don't think you can say that. Are they being tolerant of your view?
No.
In claiming that you're intolerant, what are they? Intolerant, right? It's kind of a self-contradictory system. You can't say that somebody else is intolerant without really coming off intolerant yourself. And so these are some good points to start off on. Tolerance. Here's the dictionary definition of this, kind of just a more basic sense, not really so much how it's used in our culture, but it's the ability or willingness to tolerate something. In particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. So in other words, it's kind of this, I can put up with something. I know I don't agree with it, I know I don't believe that, but I kind of put up with it. That's generally how we use that term. And so that's the dictionary definition of tolerance. Now, there's a distinction between having a patient disposition towards somebody or towards an idea and actually condoning an activity. We have to separate those two ideas. There's being patient, and then there's condoning the behavior. Now, toleration, in a sense, is a very biblical idea. As Christians, in a sense, we are to be tolerant. Now, what sense is that? The second point here says toleration, or the Bible calls it long-suffering, is to be exercised as a general disposition of Christians. Long-suffering is something that we are called to be. I want to look at a few verses here together. We'll begin in the back this evening with you, Miss Joanne. And go ahead and open up to Galatians 5 and verse 22. Galatians 5 and verse 22. We're going to see here, as Paul lists the fruit of the one element of the fruit of the Spirit is long-suffering. So let's take a look at this together. Galatians 5:22.
But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith.
All right, very good. So long-suffering is part of the fruit of the Spirit. All that fruit of the Spirit is describing characteristics that Christians are to have that show whether or not Christ is really living in them. And long-suffering is one of those things. Long-suffering, defined, means something like this. It's a state of emotional calm in the face of provocation or misfortune without complaint or irritation. It's patient endurance of wrong without anger or taking vengeance. It's having a long fuse. Paul mentions this also in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 in describing biblical love. It suffereth long. It's patient. And so in that sense, Christians are called to have a kind of a patient disposition, to not be easily rattled and quick-tempered, even when somebody might disagree with us. Let's look, we're going to skip the middle reference, but let's look next at 2 Timothy 4:2. 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 2. And for those who aren't normally with us, our custom in this class is we kind of snake around, and if you want to read, you can. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine too. You can just say pass and we'll move on, but we just kind of take one verse at a time and have you guys read those. So whoever's next, let's read 2 Timothy 4:2.
Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine.
All right, very good. So, what's Paul telling Timothy to do here? It's an older preacher, apostle, writing to this younger preacher, Timothy. What's he telling? What's the main command here in verse 2? Preach the word. Preach it, right?
All of it.
All of it. Be instant, in season, out of season. In other words, be ready. Be steadfast. Reprove, rebuke, and exhort. What do those things mean?
Well, rebuke someone when they're wrong.
Rebuke someone when they're wrong, right? That we don't like that, do we?
Love and way.
Love it. But that's where the end of the verse comes in.
Right.
He doesn't say to do so impatiently. He doesn't say to flap the handle. He says to do all of those things. You speak out against sin. You be as strong as horseradish, as some people say, about the truth. But you do so in a long-suffering way. You're patient with people. It reminds us in Acts chapter 19, we're not going to go read this, but there was a man speaking by the name of Apollos. He was a great speaker in Ephesus. He was preaching. He only knew the baptism of John. And he was preaching, and Aquila and Priscilla, knowing Christ, knowing the baptism of Christ, saw that he really wasn't teaching the whole truth, or perhaps maybe there's some error in there. They didn't publicly, they took him, it says, the text tells them that they took him aside, and they showed him the way of God more perfectly. And he, being an honest heart, changed, and he believed what was right. And then he went on to Corinth and was very instrumental in the development of that church. And so we're to do so with long suffering. And so that's the idea here is, just because society has made this idea of tolerance kind of perverted and distorts the meaning of it. There is a sense of biblical tolerance that Christians are to have, and that's more of a patience and a long suffering. It doesn't mean that we put up with sin, and we're going to look at, in just a moment at what some of the boundaries of this long suffering are. All right, the third point here is toleration should be exercised in regards to the consciences of brothers and sisters in Christ. We're not going to go read this, but in 1 Corinthians 8, the issue came up with meats offered to idols. And Paul knew that there was nothing significant about the meat that was offered to an idol, because an idol isn't anything in the world. You know, meat's meat. But there were some brethren that had a conscience problem with eating meats offered to idols. In their minds, they connected it with idol worship. And so what did Paul tell the brethren to do? To trample all over those brethren's conscience? No. What did he tell them to do?
Don't eat it.
Exactly. Don't eat it in front of them. Go out of your way to make sure you don't violate your brother's conscience. And so in that sense, we need to have long suffering and toleration of people's conscience issues. And so that's definitely taught in Scripture. I found a couple of quotes. How many of you have heard of J.W. McGarvey? Okay, I see a few of your hands going up. J.W. McGarvey was a preacher back in the 1800s, very instrumental in the Restoration movement, and his commentary on Acts has been called by many, next to the inspired writings, one of the best works ever written. It's a tremendous commentary in the book of Acts. I think it's available for free online. You can look that up, J.W. McGarvey. But he had a couple of quotes in this regard too. He said, "Tolerance is not an easygoing indifference. If anyone does not care about that which his fellow men believe in religion, that is not being tolerant. It is plain indifference. No faithful evangelist of God's Word can afford to be indifferent about that which his fellow men believe." Now, that statement flies directly in the face of what our culture is teaching. Our culture teaches that your business is your business, my business is my business, what I believe is up to me, what you believe is up to you, and you don't need to be trying to tell me what to believe, and I'm not going to tell you what to believe. It's kind of this idea where it's taboo to try to convince somebody else that something that they might not be aware of is true, or maybe something they believe is wrong. But he's saying, look, tolerance isn't about just being indifferent to things. If you don't genuinely care about what your fellow brothers and sisters, broadly speaking in humanity, believe, especially when it comes to salvation, he says that's not tolerance, that's indifference. You just don't care. And that's a very good point. The second point he says is genuine tolerance implies freedom from bias and bigotry with reference to the views of others, and allows them freedom of thought in arriving at their conclusions. In other words, what he's talking about is having the type of tolerance that allows people room to discover things for themselves. I think in the church, sometimes we have a tendency to just want to tell people, here's what you need to believe. Here, you have to believe this. And of course, we preach the Word, but to a degree, people have to discover it for themselves. Not that you just leave them out to hang, but it has to be their own, right? If someone just believes something because somebody told them to believe it, can it really be said that that's their faith? Is that really in the Word of God, or just in what somebody's told them? And so what he's saying here is maybe you're studying with somebody who has some ideas that are not right. You work with them. You show them the truth. You try to guide them along in a way that they can discover it and figure it out for themselves. And the person who has a good and honest heart, who wants to do what's right, is going to make sure that their views and their behavior matches up with Scripture. And so that's the point here, what tolerance is and what it is not. I won't read this next long quote. You have it in your handouts. But what are the limits of this toleration? There's some limitations to this. First of all, the Bible plainly teaches evil cannot be tolerated. Evil cannot be tolerated. Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 13. Secondly, wickedness cannot be tolerated. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 2. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, and we looked at this in our 1 Corinthians class, which was our last class before this one, that there was a brother who was living in open sexual sin. And because of that, Paul actually rebukes the church for not exercising church discipline. In other words, he's criticizing them for being indifferent or tolerant of his sin. That's exactly what he's talking about. He said, your glorying is not good. They apparently were bragging about the fact that they were so loving and so tolerant that they just accepted this brother in his sin. And so Paul is rebuking that, and many congregations today, the same thing could be said. The congregation back in Corinth just kind of accepted the person as they were with no plan to try to rebuke that. And so what did Paul tell them to do? He told them to put out that little piece of leaven that affects everybody so that they might be able to come back, that they might be able to learn to change their ways. And so very, very important that we understand that concept as it pertains to sin. Idolatry in any form cannot be tolerated. 1 Corinthians 10:7 gives the warning to the church to look at Israel as their example. They were idol worshippers. He says, don't do what they did. Many of them died in the wilderness because of their disobedience, because of their idol worship. Now, most people in America don't bow down to a little figurine, right? Some places in this world people do that. I've seen it with my own eyes. People will go and they'll worship, a wooden figure or a gold figure. They'll put food in front of it as an offering. But in America, we really don't see that as much. But does that mean we don't have idolatry? What is idolatry?
To worship anything other than God.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's taking anything that belongs to God, and true worship would be included in that, and replacing it with something else, a counterfeit. Colossians 3:5 specifically identifies covetousness as being idolatry. The love of money, the love of things, the desire to have what somebody else has. And for many people in our country, that is their God. Constantly chasing physical possessions. Anything that takes our complete devotion and our love and our worship that's not the God of heaven, that's an idol. That's an idol. And so idol worship cannot be tolerated in any form. And also doctrinal errors in matters of faith cannot be tolerated. It seems that many today have the idea that, it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you're doing right. But the truth is, we can't really be what God wants us to be, living-wise, unless we believe what God wants us to believe, faith-wise. Look at Galatians chapter 1, beginning at verse 6. Galatians 1, 6 through 9. And whoever's next, go ahead and read that for us.
I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed.
Paul's not mincing any words there, is he? There were some serious doctrinal errors that were being taught in those churches of Galatia. And so right at the beginning of his letter, he tells them, if any person comes and preaches to you something different than we inspired apostles preach to you, let that person be accursed or anathema. Very, very serious warning. So we can't tolerate doctrinal errors in matters of faith. We won't look at this together, but in your own study, I recommend you check out chapter 2, verse 4, and also 1 Timothy 6, 3 through 5. Now, so with these things in mind, as we're kind of letting these things marinate a little bit, is there any judgment on our part? Is there any discernment on our part involved when we're determining when is the time to be firm and when to exercise patience and forbearance?
Yes.
Does everybody understand the question? In other words, does it take judgment or discernment on our part to figure out when is the time to be firm and bold and plain with people, and times maybe when to be a little more patient? And Mr. Frank said yes, and I would agree with him. What do you guys think?
Well, you've got to deal with the individual. In this world today, every individual is different. In your personal life, working life, or in the church life. One individual you may be able to come from. As I used to tell young people in the world, I had a young man come to me one time and said, "You don't treat us all the same." I said, "You're correct in this sense. Each of you are different. The way I handle you is different, but the rules have never changed. You're all the same." So it's the same thing when you're dealing with a Christian. You may have a brother you can go talk to and open up, and his ears are open and he doesn't become defensive. You may have another brother who automatically goes defensive mode. You've got to approach that brother, showing that you're coming in love. And that's always the biggest challenge of a Christian, is how you're approaching that brother or sister to let them know it's love, because the human instinct is always defensive. And no matter what we do, it's always in the defensive mode, just the kind of thing. So a lot of times when in my life, when I'm dealing with people in church or out of church, when I see they're defensive, I step back and I say, hold on, I'm not here to be defensive. We have an opportunity to correct something here, and this is what we're going to do while we're here. But it always has to be done patiently and lovingly, and I think that's where our biggest error and problem today is. It's all of us. How do we handle that? And how do we handle each situation? Where there's each person is different. So what I was telling to a group of men at Foundation 4, I said, when you got a situation where you got to talk to an individual, you're not sure and you're upset, that's not the time to go talk. You go home and pray and study about it. And if you still don't feel like you're ready, pray and study more. Do not make that attempt until you know that your mind is open and you're going in love and nothing else but love. With God's word to show them love. If you can't do it, you step away and not tempt it.
All right, a lot of great things, John. Especially, every person's different, and also every situation's different, right? There's no two things that are just carbon copy alike, and so there's always going to be a degree of judgment and discernment on our part as we approach any situation that might come up in our lives, especially when it comes to making a decision. Okay, do I need to be more firm with this person, be more plain, or do I need to cater my approach to the individual in the situation? Taking that a step further, what should be the criteria to help us decide about which approach is better? I mean, obviously we always come out of love. There's never justification for being ugly or mean-spirited or making it a personal pride, I'm right versus you're wrong. It's about, like you said, John, honoring God's word and God's truth, and about that being upheld. We always come out of love, but nonetheless, we read about some of the apostles, some of the things that Jesus said, out of love, but very firm and very plain sometimes, because the situation warranted that. And so what criteria should be used? What should be the deciding factors? Okay, how do I approach the situation? What should be some criteria to help me decide which approach might be better?
Just in the scriptures.
What's that now?
Just go to the scriptures.
Okay. But yeah, absolutely, always backed up by the scriptures. But in terms of the individuals involved, what factors in their lives? Let me just give an example. Do you think level of knowledge might be a deciding factor?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? If you've gone to a brother or sister about the same issue over and over and over again, and you know they know better, your approach might be a little more firm with that person versus maybe somebody who you know has never even heard this part of the Bible, doesn't know, maybe a little weaker, a little spiritually young. Your approach might need to be a little more tender with that person. Do you see? The level of knowledge might have something to do with that. Are there other criteria that you can think about that might? I think John hit on one, kind of personal, emotional propensities. Some people might be a little quicker to anger, and you don't want to incite that unnecessarily. Good, Mr. Ed, you have something?
There proceeds with love and understanding, and that understanding carries with it not only the understanding of the scripture, but on the understanding of where your pupil is in the maturity of the scripture.
Exactly. Their spiritual maturity level
Yes.
is huge. Absolutely. One of the kind of maxims or universal laws of evangelism is you got to take somebody where they are and guide them where they need to be. Not everybody's at the same place spiritually. That doesn't mean we ever compromise the truth or weaken the truth or water it down because somebody isn't spiritually mature. We don't ever water down the truth. But we're talking more about an approach at this point, about when to be more direct, a little more firm, and when to be a little more soft in our approach, I guess would be the way to put that. So that's a great point. Does the issue at hand have something to do with it? Does the nature of the problem change our approach?
Yes.
Somebody came in here and said Jesus Christ is not the Son of God. We're going to have problems right here, right now. I'm not going to let somebody say something like that, and get away with it. You know, that's a matter of faith. I mean, no doubt about it. That's black and white. I'm going to stand as strong as horseradish against that. I'm not going to be ugly, but I'm not going to let that slide. But there might be areas of preference, matters of conscience that might not necessarily be a matter of faith that we may differ on, right? Meats offered to idols was an issue in the first century. We have some similar issues now. The trick is figuring out, okay, what's a matter of faith versus what's a matter of judgment or expediency. So the nature of the problem is going to change our approach, isn't it? Some problems are more personal in nature too, are they not? Some things hit a little closer to home, and so those are going to require more sensitivity, obviously.
Well, one of the things you have to do with the individual is you have to practice what, as James said, slow to wrath, but quick to listen. So again, we got to go back to the process of listening, hear what they say. And one of the things I learned a long time ago from an elderly lady at JCPenney's was she listened and asked questions to make sure she understood where they were coming from. I think if you use that process of asking those kind of questions, then you know where to go to from that step. Their maturity level, their understanding of the scripture, and you've got a real good direction where to go to and head forward from there. And so many times, that's, I think, again, listening is the keyest part. Once you've got the love and you know you've got the attention, you also got to listen, because you got to know understand where they're coming from, so you know how you want to talk to them and where you go to from there.
Absolutely. Very good.
Someone recently told me that's the reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth.
I agree with that. He's trying to teach us a lesson. What are the 2 eyes for? I guess you got to see 2. You got 2 nostrils, 1 nose. I'm not. All right. Okay. Real quick. Kind of back to the original point of postmodernism, this idea of being tolerant, and you Christians are intolerant. Doesn't it seem to you that Christians have to be tolerant of everybody else, but when it comes to Christians wanting free speech and wanting to declare what the Bible says, people want to quiet us pretty quickly? It seems like Christians are the only group. I mean, even Muslims in this country are really given more speech rights, it seems. At least that's how I perceive it in many cases than Christians. I don't know why that is. Exactly, and so point number 2, Ms. Barber just talked. You have freedom of speech. This idea of not allowing people to pray, not allowing people to bring their Bibles to school, not being allowed to do certain things, and this is a big problem on college campuses. I heard of a case, I don't know if I mentioned it in this class before, where a student was having a private conversation. I think it was a young lady having a private conversation with her dorm mate about homosexuality, and she just talked about what the Bible says about it. And that individual went and told the RA or whoever. It got brought to the authorities, and she had disciplinary action brought against her for some kind of a hate speech law. And this is going on all across the college campuses, where Christians who are trying to stand up for the truth are being silenced by the powers that be. And it's a clear violation of free speech, because any time that it's litigated, any time that the Christian takes enough energy and time to get a lawyer involved, they always rule on the side of the Christians that yes, this is a clear violation of free speech. This is going on all across the country. And so this idea of, well, you're not being tolerant, therefore you can't speak, that goes against, in America, our free speech laws. We've already talked about the fact that it's self-contradictory. To claim somebody else is intolerant is to be intolerant yourself. It makes believers agnostics. You guys ever heard that term before, agnostic? What's agnostic mean?
Not sure where you believe or not.
You're not sure what you believe or not, but also not even knowing if you can know the truth. God might exist. I'm not an atheist. I don't know He doesn't exist, but I just don't know that we can know. That's agnosticism. And that's kind of where the system leads. If we're just so soft and never willing to make a claim that this is absolutely true and have conviction about something and have a backbone about it, it quickly leads to this situation where we don't ever commit to anything with finality. And so we're just kind of this mixture of all these different beliefs coming together. It strips critical thinking and convictions based on reason. Instead of looking at the evidence, reasoning about whether something is true or false, it just goes to, well, my opinion about it, how I feel about it. The whole reason and critical thinking aspect of it is completely withdrawn from the equation altogether. And that doesn't help us in arriving at truth. And one of its effects is a misrepresentation of Christians. And you saw the stats if you read the book. How young people perceive Christians as they stand on the homosexuality issue is staggering. And the major media outlets have a tremendous power to sway public opinion about things, even though the things that they're teaching may not be true. And so the public perception about Christians has been damaged incredibly because of this idea that Christians are always painted, as these people that hate everybody, and they don't want anybody to be happy, and they're these bigots. And that's how Christians are portrayed in our media. And so that's one of the effects of this postmodernism. I just want to read one last quote before we finish up. I'll trust that you can check some of these out on your own. But the last quote on the last slide is, it's better to be divided by truth than to be united in error. And that's the truth. It is better to speak the truth that hurts and then heals than falsehood that comforts and then kills. It is not love and it is not friendship if we fail to declare the whole counsel of God. It is better to be hated for telling the truth than to be loved for telling a lie. If I had some disease on the inside that maybe didn't have any immediate effects on me, but later on I knew it was going to kill me, and the doctor said, well, if I tell him this truth, it's going to hurt. He's going to have these surgeries. His life is going to be threatened in the surgeries. I want to keep him happy. Would it be right for that doctor to tell me what he thinks I want to hear? Or would it be better for him to tell me what the truth is so we can try to make this thing heal properly? And that's kind of like how these false ideas are. Look, if we believe the Bible and take it seriously, there are people that are lost because they don't accept Jesus as Christ. Do we care enough about our fellow man to say something to them, even though it might hurt them at the time? That's a question we have to ponder. A very good discussion tonight. Appreciate your participation. Next week we'll deal with chapter 7. Make sure you turn in your quizzes next week, and we will go from there. Thank you for your attention.
Open the hymn book 732. 732. We praise thee, O God, for the Son of thy love, for Jesus who died. Mark, your hymn book's 255. 255. That will be our song of encouragement in a few moments. And if you have it marked, turn with me to 632. We'll sing the first and last verse of this one. 632. One the Lord has made the race, through one has come the fall. Where sin has gone, must go His grace. The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone, must go His grace. The gospel is for all. Receive ye freely, freely give. From every land they come. Unless they hear, they cannot live. The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone, must go His grace. The gospel is for all.
Open up your New Testament to Romans chapter 12, please. Romans chapter 12. One of the most touching and attention-grabbing and gripping things, at least in my opinion, is when a little newborn baby smiles for the first time. Being able to look at a little child and knowing that they're experiencing things literally for the first time, and seeing that pure joy that's inside of them when they smile. There's something that draws us in about that. It almost forces us to smile and grips our attention in such a way where we can't look away from him or her. Maybe they're experiencing peekaboo for the first time. Maybe they are being tickled for the first time. I don't know many babies that like that, but they're experiencing something that brings them joy, and they show it. Now, as we get older, the sources of our joy change, don't they? Peekaboo loses its luster. It doesn't make us smile like it once did. And we all have things that are unique to us that bring us enjoyment in terms of just earthly things. Some of you might really love to play golf or some other sport. Some of you may love shopping, maybe for some interior decorating materials. Perhaps you like a certain food and that makes you happy. I know for me, I love a nice, robust, strong cup of coffee in the morning. That's one of my earthly joys here that I enjoy, and I think many of you enjoy that as well. However, many people derive all the joy that they have from these temporary external things. If you were to take one of those things away that brings them so much joy, it wouldn't be left with much. And many people go through life in that way. What happens when those things are taken away? Do we lose our joy? For the Christian, there is one joy that surpasses any physical joy we may experience, any temporal joy. And that joy is the hope of our salvation. Let's look at Romans chapter 12 and verse 12. In this chapter, Paul is describing how Christians are to behave, how they are to love, how they are to think. And in verse 2, he gives the commandment to not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And he is telling Christians how to think, how to live in this chapter, very practical things. And he says in verse 12, rejoicing in hope. The tense of the verb rejoicing connotes a continuous action. You're doing it now and you continue to do it. It's describing a state of being for the Christian. And so rejoicing here means to, quote, enjoy a state of happiness and well-being as a result of one's future hope of Christ's return and of the Christian redemption. That's what is the content of our hope. Christ coming back and the promise of being redeemed and going to heaven with Him forever. That's the hope. That's the content of the hope. Now, the rejoicing is a natural byproduct of that. If we can't rejoice about that, then I don't know what we're going to rejoice about. That's the greatest news that there is. The hope is that which brings us joy. It's not the type of joy that is momentary or fleeting. There are some things that bring us very temporary joy. We're talking about something much deeper than that, deep in our core, that brings us an inner state of contentment and happiness. And this is a joy that is a present state of being because of our relationship to Christ. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 4, Paul says to rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Paul wrote that letter from prison. We know that he suffered many different things, and we know that this letter that talks more about joy than any other, he was writing from a prison cell. In fact, in Acts chapter 16, we read about Paul and Silas being imprisoned in Philippi itself and singing praises to God all the while. They had a joy within their heart. In 1 Thessalonians 5:8, we're told that we're to put on certain Christian armor. And one of those things is the helmet of the hope of salvation. It's something we're to always have on, this hope and this joy that comes from that hope. One has said the person who does not look at what can be seen, but eagerly waits for what cannot be seen, is the one who rejoices in hope. In other words, the person who realizes that there's more to life than what I see in the physical realm, the person who sets their eyes upon heaven and upon spiritual realities, is the only person that can truly experience this type of joy. Because so long as our joy is attached to this world, when this world crumbles or our life circumstance changes, the joy also goes with it. And so this type of joy is fixated upon heaven. One thing that we know that gives joy to a child is the way they behave on Christmas Eve most of the time. There's no other night during the year that they will ask to go to bed early because they know it's waiting for them on Christmas morning. That anticipation, that's kind of like how Christians are to be in anticipation of Christ's return. Many people think that's going to be a dreadful day, but for those of us who are in Christ, that's not going to be a dreadful day. That's a great day that we should welcome with great anticipation, and that anticipation brings joy. I don't know about you, but if I know there's something fun coming up, maybe I got I'm about to drink that coffee, or I'm about to go on a trip that I know is going to be good, or I know I'm about to see somebody I haven't seen in a long time that's very dear to me, that builds up kind of an excitement and anticipation. And that's the type of feeling I believe that Paul wants us to feel about the coming of Christ. So where is our joy? If it's not in the hope of redemption and Christ's return, it's in the wrong place. That's the truth. Do you derive all of your joy from earthly things? Earthly relationships only? What happens when those things are taken away? What happens when that accident happens and that person is no longer in your life? What happens when you lose the ability to swing a golf club or do things that you normally were able to do? If our joy is fixated upon those things, then what's left? Satan has many counterfeit sources of joy that can endure for a time. However, inwardly they corrupt and draw us away from the true source of joy, which is the hope of heaven. We as Christians need to renew our sense of hope and joy in that hope. I fear that many times Christians nowadays come across as sort of negative, unjoyful people. We need to be the most joyful people on earth because of what we have in Christ, because of the living hope that we have. It's not unrealistic. It's not this artificial happiness all the time. It's a deep sense of contentment and joy no matter what happens here, because we know what's going to happen over there. Those who may not be in Christ this evening, you want to get rid of that weight that's on your shoulders, that's weighing you down. It's called sin. Christ can release you from that. It's called redemption. He can buy us back from the slavery of sin and make us servants of His, if we will only accept Him as Savior by obeying the gospel of Christ. If we want to be forgiven, if we want real abiding hope, the only way we can do that is through Christ, if we'll only come to Him. The Lord extends an invitation this evening. If you have any spiritual need, if you need prayers of the congregation, if you're having struggles with this joy or hope, or you'd like to become a Christian tonight, we'd encourage you to do that while we all stand and sing this invitation song.
Things that are higher, things that are nobler, these have allured my sight. I will hasten to Him, hasten so glad
few quick announcements this evening, and we will be dismissed. A few upcoming events. I printed up a September calendar, and it was out there Sunday. There were many significant events that I overlooked to put on there, and they have been updated. And so you can pick one up. There's a new set out there, so go ahead and pick another one up that has included Tuesday morning ladies class, also Thursday night class, and also the singing, the area wide singing this month. And so make sure you pick up an updated calendar. On the 14th, Saturday week, we're having our leadership class here at Northside, and so we encourage all the men to attend that at 9:30 on Saturday morning on the 14th. Also, don't forget that on the 22nd of this month, which is a Sunday, after our morning worship, we're going to be having a fellowship meal. And after the fellowship meal, we're going to have a representative from the Lads to Leaders program, Mike Horn, come to speak to us and educate us about the program and help us in figuring out how we can implement that here at Northside. For those who weren't here for that announcement, Lads to Leaders is a great leadership development program, especially designed for young people. The youngest ages, basically, if they can walk on up to high school. And it's something that also the whole congregation can take part in and help them out with that as well. And so he's going to be coming again the 22nd, and so make sure that we make plans to attend and stay after morning worship on that day. On the 27th, on Friday night, will be the area-wide singing at 7 o'clock, and I believe it's at Manchester, if my memory serves. That's right, Miss Joanne shaking her head. Very good. All right. We have many, obviously, in our sympathy and sick list that we need to remember. I was going to ask Jerry about her son Michael, any updates on him. I was also going to ask Travis about his sister, but has anybody heard on either of those two?
Jerry's out of town because her husband's niece died. Michael's still waiting, and her nephew is still in the hospital. So they have a lot going on.
Absolutely, okay.
And also, I put Audrey's address on the bulletin board. I wish everybody would please send her a card because she sounds very, very weak.
All right, Audrey's living with her son in Huntsville now, and so we need to check out that address and send her a card at that address. I know that we got news that Johnny had her child today. As far as I know, Mama and baby are healthy. I don't have any detailed information about that. So just wanted to keep that in mind and make sure that we pray for their continued health in that. And also, Jackson McCoy is going to be shipping off for basic training for the Navy here coming up pretty soon. I think, I don't know if it's this week or maybe next week, but here pretty shortly. So we need to remember him in prayer. Maybe if you could think to maybe call him or send him a note of encouragement, let him know that we care about him. Any other announcements, prayer requests, Mr. Bill?
Jimmy Yarborough, I talked to him yesterday, and Laurel's not doing very well. Laurel's pretty sick. So we need to not only go in prayer, just pray for her.
Lori Yarborough. Anybody else? Stand one more time and let our closing prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the day that you've given us. We're thankful, Father, for the privilege that we've had to be here this evening and study from that word. We're thankful, Father, for the lesson we've had concerning tolerance, and we pray that as we go about our lives, we can understand the relevance of the word and use tolerance in our lives as you would have us to do. We pray, Father, for those who are mentioned as being evil. We ask that you bless them as only you can. Return them to a portion of their health that be within the guidelines of that will. Father, we are prayerful for this congregation. We pray that it can always be unified in service to thee and grow spiritually and in truth. We pray, Father, for those that are contemplating surgery. We ask that you help them to reach a decision that would be the best one for them. And we just thank thee for that situation. Bless us as we leave this evening. Forgive us of our sin. We ask in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
She's not. think they had to. How are you doing? Hey, you can call me Tori.